Well, hello, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming today. We're happy to have such a wonderful turnout. We're very excited to have Dr. Andrew Budson here today to speak with us about his book called 7 Steps to Managing Your Memory, What's Normal, What's Not, and What to Do About It. This is certainly a subject of concern to all of us, and we're very grateful to have him here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it is a pleasure to speak with you today. I am a neurologist and a professor of neurology at Boston University, also a lecturer of neurology at Harvard Medical School, but where I mainly spend my time is at the VA in Boston, where I work to direct the memory disorders program as well as the education programs there. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is a little bit about research. And if anyone is interested in finding out about the research that we have at the Boston University Alzheimer's Disease Center, where with Christina Dieter-Lizzi I run the education programs, you can sign up to get information on our newsletter. And you can also sign up if you're interested in participating in research. And we need everybody to help out with the research, whether or not your memories are normal or whether you're having a little memory problems. We love everybody's help. So the way I like to start my talks is by getting your views on some very common memory problems that can affect all of us. And as I read off each of these issues, if you feel that this is something that's just part of normal aging, part of getting a little older, give me a thumbs up to say, oh, I think that's okay. If you think that when I read this off, this sounds a little bit concerning, like perhaps it's a problem, give me a thumbs down to say, no, this is not normal. All right, so here is the first problem. You walk into a room to get something and you forget why. What do you think? Come on. All right, this is normal. All right, everybody thumbs up. All right. How about this one? You cannot think of the name of a friend of yours from church, even though you have met her a half a dozen times. All right, very good. Very good. How about this one? You're having trouble remembering some of the details of your life, such as your wedding. Yeah, all the wives in this room are like, thumbs down. Okay. All right, how about this one? A week after seeing a movie, you have trouble remembering the name of the movie and parts of the plot. Okay. When you are driving and not paying attention, you take one or more wrong turns, and you end up somewhere you did not intend to be. Okay. You are having trouble coming back with the correct items from the store unless you write them down and look at the list. Okay? You're spending too much time looking for your keys, glasses, wallet, or purse. You are having trouble finding your car in a parking lot. And my all-time favorite, your family tells you that you've asked that question before. Okay, so it's my goal today to talk with you about how you can figure out whether these and other common memory problems are actually normal or whether they're not, and what to do about it. And along the way, we're going to talk about things like diet, what's actually been shown to be healthy to eat and what to stay away from. We'll talk about the importance of exercise, and we'll talk about different strategies that everyone can use to keep their memory stronger. But I'm first going to introduce 2 characters that my co-author and I put into the book to help to illustrate the 7 steps to managing your memory and to bring things a little bit more to life. I did want to let you know that if you are interested in getting this information, but you don't want to read the stories, you can totally skip the stories. They are optional. But in a little meeting such as this, it's a little bit more interesting to read the stories. So I'm going to sort of focus on those during this talk. So here's the first character. This character is named Sue. That could have been embarrassing. Sue thinks to herself, she was halfway through lunch with one of her closest friends before the name of her friend's husband came to her. She was able to remember everything about him, except his name. Sue was able to cover for this little memory lapse. In fact, she has become quite good at covering for memory lapses such as these and laughing it off when the lapse was noticed. Sue herself, however, isn't laughing. Sue is worried about her memory. Worried, in fact, is a bit of an understatement. She is absolutely terrified that she is developing Alzheimer's disease. She just turned 80, the same age that one of her friends, Mary, was diagnosed with the disease. Now, Sue has not mentioned her concerns to her children or her friends. Her children would only worry and overreact, and she doesn't need that. After all, she has no difficulty living in her own home. Her friends would not be interested in hearing about her concerns. It would only make them anxious about their own similar memory difficulties. Or worse, they would start to treat her like an invalid and stop including her in their activities. Now, she has mentioned her concerns to her husband, John. He doesn't think her memory is abnormal, and she doesn't want to worry him by bringing it up again. Sue thinks about some of her other memory lapses. Just yesterday, she walked downstairs to the basement, and she could not remember for the life of her what she was going down to get. It was only when she walked back to the kitchen that she remembered the roll of paper towels that she needed, which she then successfully retrieved. She doesn't have trouble remembering things that happened yesterday or last week, but she finds it quite difficult to remember some of the things from her childhood. Is that normal? Sue isn't sure. So what do you think? Should Sue be worried? No. Split decision. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. Let's consider another story. So this story is about Jack. Now, Jack has just come from his local community lodge where Sam, one of his buddies, told him that he was worried about Jack's memory and he thought Jack should get his memory checked out because he was worried that Jack could be suffering from Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Could he be right? Jack thinks about Sam's words. He isn't sure whether he should thank Sam or slug him. Part of him wants to do both. Deep down, he knows that Sam is trying to be helpful, but he has a lot of nerve. Sure, Jack knows he has some memory problems, but who his age doesn't? Just because Sam's wife has dementia, all of a sudden he thinks he's a goddamn doctor. Not that the doctors know very much about memory problems from what Jack could tell. Sam had to take Mary to the doctor 4 times before the doctor actually did anything about it. Jack considers his memory. He didn't think anything was wrong, at least not any more than with anyone else's age. He is 72 after all. At least half his friends have similar difficulties remembering what happened yesterday or what they were going to do the next day. The more he thinks about it, the more he thinks his memory probably is normal. Better than normal, in fact. How many people his age can list off their buddies from high school and the make, model, and year of the cars that they drove? Still, Jack feels unsettled. Sam stressed that the reason he was bringing it up is that there were medications that Jack could take to improve his memory. He doesn't want to be stupid. Sticking his head in the sand is definitely not the right thing to do. After all, he has never been one to run away from a problem. He'd rather stand and confront it. Perhaps he should call his doctor. So, to help us figure out what's going on with Sue and with Jack, we're going to begin our 7 steps to managing your memory. And step 1 is learn what is normal memory. And to learn what is normal memory, I'm going to give you a filing system analogy of your memory system. So, the first important part of this filing system is our file clerk. The file clerk is actually our frontal lobes. They're right behind our forehead. And it is the frontal lobe file clerk's job to take in information from the outside world and to put it into the physical file cabinet. When we need to retrieve a memory, the file clerk pulls open the file cabinet drawer, searches through the different files, and pulls out the memory that we need. And that's how we're able to store and retrieve memories. So that's all good. But the thing is, as we're all getting a little bit older, our frontal lobe file clerk is getting a little bit older too. So what happens? Well, in an analogous sense, the frontal lobe gets a little hard of hearing. What? And because of that, as part of normal aging, information may need to be repeated a couple of times in order for it to get into our memory store. The other thing that happens is, as our frontal lobe file clerk gets older, he doesn't move quite as quickly as he used to. And it can take a little bit more time until he gets over to the file cabinet. So as part of normal aging, it may take a little bit of extra time to be able to find that memory that you're looking for. The other thing is he doesn't see quite as well as he used to. And because of that, as he's pulling open the file drawer and looking through the files, he may need a hint or a cue in order to tell him which is the right file to pull out. Okay? But the important thing is that if that memory got into the file cabinet, it should be able to be retrieved, even if it takes a little bit of time or a hint or a cue. So those are some of the changes that occur with normal aging. Now, step 2 is determine if your memory is normal. And here we are going to continue with our filing system analogy. But now we're going to talk about the file cabinet itself. So the file cabinet is another part of the brain. It's actually our hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain deep in the temporal lobes, and so that's deep inside where your temples are, just behind your eyes. And this is the part of the brain that stores new memories. So you can think of this as a new memory file cabinet. We actually have a different file cabinet over here for the older memories, okay? And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So the problem with Alzheimer's disease is that Alzheimer's attacks the file cabinet, and it damages it, and it eventually destroys it. And the way I think about it is, imagine if you pull open the file drawer and you look down inside and you see there's a gigantic hole inside the file cabinet. So you could have the very best file clerk in the world pulling in the information from the outside world, putting it into the file cabinet. But what happens? Because there's a big hole there, the information is going to disappear, never to be retrieved. And when that happens, we talk about rapid forgetting. And rapid forgetting of information is never normal, and it should always be evaluated. So now you know a little bit more about how memory works, what are the changes that happen with normal aging, and what are some of the things that are not normal. And what we're going to do now is we're going to learn a little bit more about Alzheimer's disease and the changes to thinking and memory that can occur in that disorder. We're going to catch up with Sue. You may recall that Sue was worried about her memory and that one of her friends, Mary, was diagnosed with this disease. So Sue is actually speaking with Mary's husband, Sam, to learn a little bit more about it. How did it start with Mary? Sue asks Sam. Sam looks closely at Sue, seeing the worry in her eyes. Well, everybody's different, but I think with Mary, it began when she began to get lost while she was driving. Mind you, I didn't know what was going on at first. I just knew it would often take her a long time to go from one place to another. I also noticed that she had begun to travel to fewer places. It was as if the circle of where she would go was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. First, she didn't drive into the city. Then she didn't drive anywhere new. Then she didn't drive onto the highway. I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't really notice it at first. I mean, who really wants to fight the traffic in the city or on the highways anyways? But the red flag to me was when I got a call from the doctor's office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon saying that she had not shown up for her 1 o'clock appointment. So now I'm starting to get worried. Did she have an accident? Was she okay? A few minutes later, she comes through the door in tears, telling me she couldn't find the doctor's office. That was the thing that really made me realize that something was wrong. So let's talk about getting lost. Anybody of any age can get lost. You make a wrong turn, something doesn't look familiar, bam, you're lost. But what do you normally do about it? Well, you pull out a map, maybe from your glove compartment or maybe from an application on your phone, or you pull over and you ask someone for directions and bam, you're back on your way. But the problem with Alzheimer's is that maps and phone applications can be complicated and hard to use. You can ask someone for directions, but they're often long and complicated and hard to remember. And that's the reason that patients with Alzheimer's so often have difficulties in terms of getting lost. Now let's talk about some of the other things that can happen with Alzheimer's disease. So one of them is losing things, okay? But the hard thing to know is it normal or not? So raise your hand if within the last year you have misplaced your keys, glasses, wallet, purse, cell phone, or something like that. Right? It's really common. So how do you know if it's normal or not? Well, if you were someone that all your life, every morning, you spend 5, 10, 15 minutes hunting around the house for your keys, glasses, wallet, cell phone, purse, and now you're getting a little bit older and you're still spending 5, 10, 15 minutes hunting around the house for these things, well, that's probably normal for you and probably is not something to be concerned about. If, on the other hand, you are someone who's always been very organized, never had difficulty hunting around for things, but now you're spending 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour hunting for these things. Maybe some of them never turn up at all and you have to get new keys made or you have to buy a new cell phone. That would be concerning. And the point I'm trying to make here is whether something is normal or not doesn't simply depend on what the problem is. It also depends on whether it is a change for you or for the individual that you're concerned about. So whether it's a change makes a difference. Now the last thing that I want to talk about in this section is about repeating questions and stories. Now anybody can repeat a question or repeat a story once or twice. You may not recall that you had told that story to that person. But when it is happening sort of again and again and again and again, I was giving a talk on Tuesday and a woman came up to me and said, my best friend, every time I see her, she tells me exactly the same story. So something like that would be concerning when it's happening again and again. Because the reason that people are repeating questions and stories over and over is because of that rapid forgetting that we were talking about. So you can imagine that he or she is just not able to hold on to the information that they already got the answer to the question or that they already told that story to you before. So those are a little bit of the changes that we see in Alzheimer's disease. So now we're going to turn to step 3, which is understand your memory loss. And here I want to talk about some of the terms that are used when we talk about memory disorders because it can be confusing. So I want you to raise your hand if you have heard of the term dementia. Raise your hand if you've heard of the term Alzheimer's disease. Raise your hand if you are able to very clearly articulate the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. Tricky, right? So let me go over it. So dementia is a general term that means that one's thinking and memory have deteriorated to the point that it interferes with their day-to-day function. So it's a general term that thinking and memory are impaired enough that day-to-day function isn't working right. And as a general term, I actually think about the word dementia like I think about the word headache. A headache is a general term, and headaches can be caused by all sorts of different things. Some causes of headache are relatively benign. You can have a muscle tension headache, you can have a migraine headache, but headaches can also be from very serious things like a stroke or a brain tumor. So it's the same thing with dementia. Dementia can actually be caused by things that are relatively benign. Believe it or not, dementia can be caused by a vitamin deficiency or a thyroid disorder, both of which are totally curable. But dementia can also be caused by diseases like Alzheimer's or frontotemporal dementia or dementia with Lewy bodies, that's very closely related to Parkinson's disease dementia, or vascular dementia, which is dementia due to strokes. So dementia is the general category, and Alzheimer's is one specific type of dementia. The reason that people often confuse them is that Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Got it? Okay. Let me ask about another term. Raise your hand if you've heard the term mild cognitive impairment. Okay, most of you. So mild cognitive impairment is when three things are present. So the first is that someone is concerned about the memory. It can be the individual themselves, it can be their family, or it could be their doctor. The second is that when the individual does pencil and paper testing, it turns out, yes, indeed, they do have a problem. So the concern is confirmed by the pencil and paper testing. The third thing is that the person's day-to-day function is normal. So by definition, they do not have dementia because they're able to function normally. And what the studies show is that approximately half of individuals that have been diagnosed as having mild cognitive impairment do in fact go on to develop either Alzheimer's disease or a related disorder over time. But that also means that the other half do not. The other half actually get better. Maybe they were feeling depressed and that was impacting their memory, and then when they feel better, their memory goes back to normal. Or maybe it was actually due to a side effect of a medication. Or maybe they had an infection. Believe it or not, something as simple as a urinary tract infection or even the flu can impact people's thinking and memory. So mild cognitive impairment sometimes means Alzheimer's is coming in the future, but sometimes it doesn't. And often we simply have to wait and see what happens. Sometimes even with our best available diagnostic techniques, we may not know the answer at a single point in time. Okay, so that's a little bit about the different terms that are used. Now, step 4 is treat your memory loss. And in this step, we talk about the different medications that are used to treat Alzheimer's disease. But in order to talk about them with you, I need to first talk a little bit more about what causes Alzheimer's and how it impacts thinking and memory. So it turns out that there's an abnormal protein that's called beta amyloid that accumulates in the brain. And we believe that this is the first thing that happens. It accumulates in these clumps or clusters that are called plaques, okay? And the plaques are outside of the brain cells. Now, right away, some of you may be wondering, are these plaques the same as the cholesterol plaques that are building up on the arteries? Are these the same as the plaques my dentist worries about on my teeth? The answer is not at all. These are totally different types of plaques. Plaque is just a sort of a technical word for schmutz, okay? So it's any sort of abnormal collection of stuff in the body they call a plaque. Okay, that's all it is. So the plaques, although they're not inside the cells, they're next to them, and they end up damaging the cells. And when the plaques damage the cells, it disrupts another protein called tau. And the tau gets all tangled up inside the cells, and it forms tangles. And so these are the plaques and tangles that you might have heard about in Alzheimer's disease. Now, once the tangles have formed inside the cells, it ends up killing the cells, all right? And the cells normally make different chemicals that allow the brain cells to talk to each other. And one of the most important chemicals, one of the most important neurotransmitters is acetylcholine. And it's for this reason that the standard FDA-approved medications to treat Alzheimer's disease help to raise up the levels of acetylcholine more to a normal level. So these are medications some of you might know about. Some of you may even be taking them. These are medications such as donepezil, whose brand name is Aricept, rivastigmine, whose brand name is Exelon, and galantamine. Okay? Now, the way these medications work from the patient and family's perspective is they can turn back the clock on memory problems, and they can turn it back by 6 to 12 months. So what that means is if someone comes to me in the clinic, I can make their memory like it was 6 months ago or maybe even a full year earlier. So yes, it's not a miracle drug. I can't make somebody's memory like it was 10, 20, 30 years earlier, but I can make it like it was 6 or 12 months earlier. And the sooner someone comes to me when the memory problems are more mild, the greater chance I'm going to be able to turn that clock back a full year. And that's actually one of the reasons that I'm here talking with you today, because I want everyone to not wait until their memory problems or memory problems of their loved ones get particularly bad. I want you to come and see your doctor, come see us in the clinic early. Okay, that's very important. Now, although I can turn the clock back on memory problems, I cannot stop the clock from ticking down. Okay, so what that means is, let's say a year and a half later, people's memory will end up being usually worse than the very first time that I saw them because things have gone downhill. I can't stop things from changing. But if the person had a good response to the medication, it's almost certainly still working. And if they stop it, what happens is they plummet 6 to 12 months worth of memory function in 1 to 2 weeks. So as long as someone had a good response to the medication, I do want them to stay on it. Okay, so that's how the standard medications work. So it's a very exciting time in this field. It's exciting for me as a doctor, and it's also exciting for patients and families because there are more new medications that are being developed to treat Alzheimer's disease today than there ever has been before in any time in history. Okay? There are medications that are working to stop the formation of that beta amyloid that forms the plaques. There are medications that use an antibody that's given through an IV once a month in the arm that can actually go in and help the body remove those plaques from the brain. And there's also medications that work on the tau and the tangles to remove them from the brain. And lastly, there are some medications that are working to turn the clock back even more so that we can make people's memory, instead of like it was 6 or 12 months ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Wouldn't that be nice? And then there's also medications that are being developed to treat some of the later symptoms of Alzheimer's, some of the agitation and frustration and aggression that can happen in some of the later stages. So there's a lot of new things going on in terms of the research. And again, if you're interested in learning about some of the studies that we have going on, you can grab one of our newsletters or one of our flyers about the different studies we have going on, and you can sign up to learn more information. Okay, so that is step 4, treat your memory loss. Now, step 5 is modify your lifestyle. And here we're going to talk about the importance of diet and exercise. And we are going to begin by catching up with Jack. So Jack has been invited over to his daughter's house, Sarah, so that she can show him what having a healthy meal is like. "So what meat are we having?" asked Jack. "We're having fish," Sarah says, as she opens the oven door, dips a brush in olive oil, and bastes a large piece of fish. Also on the roasting pan are 2 large onions and several garlic cloves. Waiting for the fish on the serving platter are some avocado slices and lemon wedges. "No meat? Not even chicken?" "No, fish, beans, and brown rice. I want you to see how delicious a healthy meal can be." Jack inhales the aroma of the roasting fish. That actually smells pretty good. Where did you learn to cook like this?" "I took a class on Italian cooking. These foods are all part of the Mediterranean diet. It's one of the very few diets that has been proven to be good for your brain." And Sarah is, of course, exactly right. So many, many different diets have been tested, but the only diet that has been shown in study after study after study to be good for the brain and help to keep one's memory strong is the Mediterranean diet and a few variations of the Mediterranean diet. So what does it consist of? So the Mediterranean diet includes fish, olive oil, avocados, fruits and vegetables, nuts and beans, and whole grains. Okay, so those are the things that are particularly good. So what are the things that aren't good? Well, it's almost everything else. Okay, so things like red meat, fatty foods, that's like a once in a while sort of thing, not like an everyday thing. What about like white bread and sugar and cakes? So all those things, they either are sugar, which too much of is not good for us, or things like white bread and regular pasta, those are very quickly turned into sugars, and they're just not good for us. Okay, they're just not good for us. So those things are really once in a while things, not everyday things. And I should say, while talking about once in a while, there's plenty of evidence to show that even if one cannot stick to this Mediterranean diet all the time, even if you can just do it some of the time, it's absolutely positively still beneficial. But the more you can do it, the better. Now, before everyone gets all depressed and starts throwing rotten tomatoes at me, I do want to say that there is one food that some of you will be glad to hear has been shown to be good for you. And that is that chocolate in small amounts has been shown to be beneficial for thinking and memory and moods. Yes, everyone perks up when I say that word. People who are half sleeping are like, chocolate? Absolutely. So just remember that the good part of the chocolate is actually the cocoa. It's what makes the dark chocolate dark. So it's not so much, the milk and the butter and the sugar and things like that in the chocolate. It's the cocoa. And you're probably asking, how much chocolate can I have, Doc?
No,
So,
what I'm going to ask you, Doctor, is just a minute ago you were saying to us sugar, bread things, they turn to sugar. Okay? Now you're saying that one of the most intense pieces of candy loaded with sugar is good for us. How can that be?
yeah, so what I just explained is it's not the sugar in the chocolate, it's the cocoa. It's what makes dark chocolate dark. So if you're eating a piece of this dark chocolate and you say, geez, this is a little bit bitter, that's the right chocolate to eat. Okay, okay. And the amount is approximately 1/3 of a chocolate bar, or it's one of those sort of Ghirardelli squares or one of those Lindt squares. And you want to try and have it as dark as you can. So you can have a little bit of a dessert. Okay. All right. So that is a little bit about diet. Now I want to talk about exercise. And I don't need people to raise their hands to know that everyone in this room knows that exercise is good for them, right? We hear it all the time. So we're going to talk about how much and what to do and things like that. But I have first my little caution, which is if I inspire you and you think, I'm going to start exercising, the Boston Marathon is just around the corner, I'm going to start training for the Boston Marathon. Before you start your training routine, I do want you to see your doctor and make sure that your heart and your lungs and your joints and your bones are ready for whatever increased exercise you would like to do. Now, the next question is, well, you know, I've been sedentary all my life, let's suppose. So, you know, I'm 80 years old now. Is exercise really going to do me any good now? The answer is yes. There has been studies that looked at people in their 80s who have been sedentary their whole life and never exercised. And they found that in as short a time as 6 months, they too were seeing benefits from exercise. But there's also studies that show the earlier one starts, the better. So everyone in this room should be exercising. So how much do you need to do? Well, what most organizations recommend is at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week of aerobic exercise, plus 2 hours a week of exercise to help with strength and balance and flexibility. So these latter 2 hours, these are things like yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates, certain types of weightlifting. For the aerobic exercise, it should be anything that gets your heart beating a little bit faster, gets you breathing a little bit heavier. And most of the studies actually looked at walking. So brisk walking, it totally counts. Let's say, hey doc, I can't walk well. Well, I promise you, if you talk to your doctor, you'll be able to find an exercise that works well for you, whether it's something with your arms, or maybe swimming, or walking in the water. I'm sure we can find an exercise that works well for you. Maybe you say, Doc, I don't have time to do 30 minutes all at once. Well, it turns out you can split that 30 minutes into 3 10-minute increments, okay? And you can find that there's at least as much benefit, if not even more, when you split that 30 minutes up into 3 10-minute increments. So let's say you say, well, Doc, I already do 30 minutes 5 days a week. My answer is, that's great. Why don't you do more? Do an hour 7 days a week. Because the studies show some is good, more tends to be better. So exercise, exercise, exercise. So let's talk about some of the benefits of exercise. So some things I bet you already know about. I bet you know that exercise helps to improve the health of your heart, and because of that, helps to reduce the risk of strokes. So that's good, because strokes, of course, could impair the thinking and memory. Well, did you know that exercise also helps you with your balance? So you're less likely to have a fall, less likely to break a hip, and less likely to hit your head and have memory problems due to that. But did you know exercise also improves your mood? And the effect on one's mood is so strong, it's actually as powerful as almost any antidepressant that is currently on the market today. It is very, very powerful antidepressant. And exercise also improves your sleep. Now, people might say, why are you talking about sleep when you're trying to tell us about memory? So it turns out that sleep is critically important for the memory. The first reason is for sort of the obvious one. If we're very tired and are sort of falling asleep, it's hard to pay attention. And if you cannot pay attention, then you're not going to be able to remember things well. The second reason is it turns out that it's when we're sleeping that our memories go from the short-term temporary storage file cabinet to that long-term permanent file cabinet over here. And so if we do not get a good night's sleep, we're not going to be able to hold on to our memories for a lifetime. And the last reason is that beta amyloid that accumulates in those plaques is actually cleared from our brains every night when we sleep. So sleep is important for that reason too. So sleep is really a very important thing. But the most amazing thing about exercise is that exercise releases growth factors in our brains that allow us to grow new brain cells. And there is the greatest production of these new brain cells in our hippocampus, in our file cabinet of new memories. And what the studies have shown is that even in 55 to 85-year-olds, in as little as 6 to 12 months, you can actually measure the increased size of the hippocampus on an MRI scan. It's that much of an increase. And the change in the size of their hippocampus varied directly with how much improvement they did in their exercising, and it also correlated with how much their memory got better. So people ask me, is there a magic bullet, Dr. Budson? Is there something I can just do or take and then my memory is better? The answer is yes, there is. It's called exercise, aerobic exercise. Okay, so that is step 5, modify your lifestyle. Now, step 6 is strengthen your memory. And here we're going to catch up with Jack again. So Jack and his daughter Sarah have gotten into a little argument. Sarah has purchased a subscription to an online computerized brain training program, and she would like Jack to spend at least 30 minutes each day working on it. Can you just try it, Dad? I don't like those things, Sarah. I'm no good at computers. It was computers that lost me my job. I know you're a whiz at this computer stuff, but I'm not. Computers make me feel old and stupid. I'm not asking you to become an expert. I just want you to try it. The website says it can make you smarter and make your brain younger. Sarah, I know you're trying to help me, but I want to go to that pottery class so I can finish my project. And then I'm meeting the guys to play hockey. I don't have time for this computer stuff. Can't you miss your hockey game for 1 week? And your hockey game seems more like a social event anyways. You spend 1 hour playing and 2 hours chatting over dinner. So what's wrong with that? We have dinner after playing, and I'm working on eating better, just like you showed me. Can't you just try the computer? All right, for you, Sarah, I'll give it a try. But I'm still going to go to the pottery class and then go play hockeys with the guys. Making sure he is on the right page of the website, Sarah leaves her father to the computer training. Jack looks at the clock. Okay, I can spend 10 minutes on this computer stuff and still have time to go to the pottery class and get ready for hockey. Jack completes the first set of exercises. Well, wasn't as hard as I thought, but I don't feel any smarter. So, what the studies show is if you spend time on crossword puzzles or Sudoku or computerized games, you get better at crossword puzzles and Sudoku and computerized games. it simply does not translate into overall brain health. But there are actually some things that do, and Jack was doing all of them. So the first thing is he was exercising, that we've already talked about, so we know exercise is good. The second thing is Jack was doing social activities, and social activities have absolutely been shown to benefit health overall as well as brain health, thinking, and memory. And the opposite is also true, that people who become isolated and are not doing social activities, they actually get worse. Another thing that Jack was doing is he was doing something new. So it turns out, if you want to use your brain to do something, to try to help improve it, it needs to be something new, something that stretches yourself. So for Jack, he was learning pottery, which he had never done before. For you, maybe it's learning yoga, or maybe it's learning that language you always wanted to learn. Or maybe you're going to be traveling on a trip and you want to learn new information about wherever you're traveling. Whatever it is, it should be something new. Now, let me just say, I'm not trying to knock crossword puzzles. If after a busy day of socializing and exercising and doing new things, you like nothing better than curling up in your armchair and doing a crossword puzzle, that's awesome. I just don't want you to think that it's better than going on a walk with a friend, because that would be the better thing to do. And the other thing about crossword puzzles and Sudoku, boy, do I think they're better than watching TV. So if you got the choice between those two, absolutely do the puzzles and the game. And the last thing that Jack was doing is he was doing things that helped him to feel positive about aging and life in general. And that's the other thing that, believe it or not, study after study has shown, that people do better, including their thinking and memory, when they have a positive mental attitude. And we believe that the way this works is very simple. People that have a positive attitude take better care of themselves, and they get involved in things with life more. And so they eat better, they exercise more, they socialize more, and that's one of the things that helps to keep them young. Now, I want to talk now about some of the strategies that one can use. So who here has ever had difficulty remembering someone's name? Right? Very common thing. So it turns out there's a lot of things that you can do to remember things better, whether it's remembering names or other information. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of them here. So one important thing to do is to repeat the person's name out loud when you're first meeting them. So I'm going to say hello to you here. I'm Andrew. It's nice to meet you.
I'm Shirley.
You're Shirley. It's nice to meet you, Shirley. So I've just learned Shirley's name and I've repeated it back to her. Now the next thing that I will try to do to help me remember that her name is Shirley is I'm going to try to make a connection to something in my life. So it turns out that one of my favorite teachers was also named Shirley, okay? And so I am going to make a mental image of my teacher giving Shirley a hug. And I'm going to try and think about that image to help me remember her name is Shirley. The other thing that I like to do is to try and pick something out on her clothing or her face that will also help me to remember that this is Shirley. And what I'm doing now is Shirley has some glasses around her neck. And if I sort of followed the curve on one lens around to the curve on the other lens, I could draw an S. So I'm going to draw a little S in my mind on her glasses that are hanging down to help me remember that her name is Shirley. So I've repeated it out loud. I've then made a connection with something that is personal to me that will help me remember. And then I've formed a mental image. And then I've also tried to tie all of that into her clothing or something on her face or something like that that's going to help me remember. And the next thing that's very important for names is to repeat it. And you try to repeat that name like a minute later to yourself. Say, oh, this is Shirley I'm talking to. Shirley, I see the glasses, I see the image, it's Shirley. And then maybe a minute or two after that to remember that it's Shirley. So those are some of the techniques. Now another thing that's important when we're learning a name or any information is to really focus and really pay attention. So often when we are, say, at a cocktail party and we're meeting people, we are distracted for lots of different reasons. Maybe you're like, I just got here and I really need to go to the bathroom, and that's what's on my mind. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm really looking for that drink and I sort of got waylaid. I'm looking for that drink over there, so you're not paying attention. Or maybe you hear an interesting conversation going on next door. Or maybe you're trying to think of something clever to say in response. Whatever it is, we often don't pay attention when we are meeting someone. And you can actually train yourself to pay more attention and to learn how to do it. And one way to train yourself is to use mindfulness techniques. So a lot of what mindfulness techniques are good for is to help us to pay attention to what we want to pay attention and to help us to eliminate distractions, whether they're outside distractions or whether they're distractions of our own mind, things that we're doing to distract ourselves. Right, Shirley?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Now, there's a few other strategies. There's tons of strategies that we have in this book. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just mention one or two others. One way that I like to use mental images is when I'm in a parking lot or a parking garage. So I think when I asked about that parking lot example in the beginning, several of you said, oh, that just happened to me recently. So one thing you can do is to form a mental image. So I was parking at Logan Airport last week, and I parked on the 3rd floor and row C. And what I did is I formed a mental image of 3 cats on the roof of my car. And I don't really want cats on the roof of my car. I don't want their claws scratching the finish, And because of that, not only did I form an image, but I made it emotional. It was something that was a little bit disturbing to me. And that emotionality actually helps me to remember it as well, along with the image. And so when I came to look for my cats, I'm like, okay, where did I park again? And then the image popped into my head, and I knew exactly where I parked. Now, the last couple of things I want to mention about memory strategies and memory aids are what we call our 3 golden rules. So one is don't delay. Don't delay. So if you have something in your mind that you want to remember, you should write it down right away. Don't delay. So if it's an appointment that someone gives you, put it right into your calendar. If it is something that you need to pick up from the store, write it down right away. Don't delay. The second rule is keep it simple. So suppose, again, I've inspired you and you're all going to run out and you're going to buy some calendars and really get organized. And you're going to get a calendar for your refrigerator, and you're going to have one for your desk and one for your pocketbook. Wait a minute. Keep it simple. If you have multiple calendars and you're always copying things from one calendar to another, that's often a recipe to get confused and mix up, and it's on one calendar but not the other, or maybe you transpose the date. Keep it simple. Just get one calendar. And the third thing is make it routine. Make it routine. So if you're somebody that's always hunting around for keys, glasses, wallet, purse, things like that each morning, if you always put these things down, in the same place every day, so let's say maybe a little table as you walk in the door, or maybe it's a bowl or a basket, then you'll always know where they are. And even if you've never done this before in your life, you can train yourself by always putting your things in the same place. Let's say you forget, you're halfway up to your bedroom, you still have the keys in your pocket, go down, put them in the basket. You'll be able to make it routine. And once you've made it routine, then even if you are rushed or harried or talking on the phone or thinking about something else, you'll do it automatically because you've made it routine. So the last step, step 7, is plan your future. And in this step, we talk about, well, what do you do if you're having some mild memory problems, but you still want to do all the things you love in life? How do you safely keep driving? How do you safely keep working? How do you do your various hobbies? Things like that. And we talk about how to do that. And we also talk about, when is it time to hang up the keys and let somebody else chauffeur you around? When is the time to retire from that job? When is the time, to give away the power tools? And when is the time to get help from friends and family in terms of investing and things like that? So those are the 7 steps to managing your memory. And I think, I'm just looking for our organizers, I think we'll probably take about 10 minutes and we'll do some general questions all together. And then afterwards, people can come up. We can do a little book signing if you'd like to purchase a copy of the book. Again, it's $20. Normally lists for $27.95 and is about $23.50 on Amazon. But with my author's discount, I can sell it for $20. And I also invite you to sign up for our newsletter, sign up for a research study if you want. You can grab a copy of some of these things today if you like. So, who has a question for me? In the back of the room, right there.
My question is, I had 2 parents. One, they're both deceased. My question to you is it hereditary?
So the question is Alzheimer's disease hereditary? And the answer is that Alzheimer's is a disease that everyone is at risk for, whether they have a family history or not. But a family history in one's father, mother, sister, or brother does raise the risk between 2-fold and 4-fold. So to put some numbers on that, at age 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease without a parent or a sibling with the disease is approximately 3%. So with a family history, that would increase to 6 to 12%. So it's definitely an increase in risk, but I do want to point out that in this example, there's still an 88% chance that one would not have the disease at that age. So there is an increased risk, but everyone's at risk for it. You sir.
In the example you gave of the person who repeats the story routinely, doesn't remember that they have told the story before, why is it the brain can remember the facts of the story but can't remember that it's told before?
Yeah. So the question is, in the example I gave where someone's repeating the same story again and again, how come the brain can remember the facts of the story, but they can't remember that they told it, 17 times before to the same person? The reason is because we have those 2 separate file cabinets that we were talking about. So the facts of the story, they're in that older memory file cabinet that the person has slept on, transferred the memories to the older file cabinet, and that's where they're held. And as long as the frontal lobe file clerk is working, frontal lobe file clerk can pull open that drawer and pull it out. Whether or not that story has been told to that individual before, that's in the new memory file cabinet, and that's the one that even early on in Alzheimer's gets damaged. So it's because it's in the different file cabinets. You in the sweater were next.
Yes. Is also dementia hereditary? Is there a hereditary component to dementia if your parents had dementia?
Yeah.
Which
So
is, by the way, different than Alzheimer's.
Right. So I did talk about that before. I don't know if you heard that little explanation.
Yeah.
So the question is, what about dementias? Dementia hereditary. So just to reiterate, so dementia is a general term that means thinking and memory are impaired to the extent that day-to-day function is impaired. And Alzheimer's is one specific type of dementia, or if you like, one cause of dementia, and it's the most common cause. So as a neurologist, to say someone has dementia, my immediate reaction is, what kind? I don't really know what that means until I have something further to explain it. Yes, sir.
I was thinking, you were saying in your part two that people have don't know how to place things and being able to, that they don't know what's here and there and everything's always misplaced. And I don't know, like what women carry in their pocketbooks, and I don't know how people think and everything. But I would think in women's pocketbook, the two most important things to carry, besides their makeup or whatever, is their wallets and their keys. And if they keep both items in their pocketbook at all times.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So this gentleman is just making the point that one way that at least women can keep everything in their place is they keep everything in their purse, then they always know what it is. Absolutely.
But can I add something else? In my way of thinking, I mean, like, when I don't keep my wallet in my pants and stuff. So, like, I kind of keep my wallet in my den, and I know that it's there in the den.
Yeah, as long as you know where it is, that's great. You're right there.
Yes, my ex-husband has dementia, and he's taking something called Namenda.
Yes.
Do you know that?
Yes. So the question is, what about when someone's taking Namenda? So Namenda is a medication that is helpful for individuals with Alzheimer's disease or with vascular dementia in the moderate to severe stage of that disease. So it does not actually improve memory, which is one of the reasons I didn't mention it here. But what it does is it helps things that people experience in the later stage of Alzheimer's disease. So it helps people be a little bit more awake, a little bit more alert, a little bit more engaged, less withdrawn. So those are the types of benefits that you tend to see with Namenda. The other name for that is memantine. So as the disease progresses, people often become a bit more withdrawn, don't participate in things as much, and Namenda memantine can help people sort of get back into life a bit more. Yes?
When that gentleman over there about a person knowing the story and they keep reading it, is it good to tell a person, hey, that's the fifth time you've told them?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people get upset.
Yeah. So this is a very good question. So the question is, so if you have a friend who keeps repeating the same story over and over and over again, is it good to let them know? And I think it depends a little bit sort of how well you know them and whether they're a good friend or not. But if you know the person, pretty well, then it's a good, I think you can gently say, Pat, you did tell me this, once or twice before. And if you find that doesn't help and they're still telling it to you again, then I don't think I would say it again. You've said it, you can see if that helps. If it doesn't help, that really says, uh-oh, this hippocampus is not working right. She can't remember that she told me the stories, and she can't remember that I told her that she's telling me the stories. And I would want to make sure that she is seeing her doctor about these memory problems.
Unless she says to you, you have criticized me about the same thing.
A lot of times I get offended, and then sometimes you forget who you told the story to, and,
Yeah.
and they'll say, you already said that.
You, sir, go ahead. Coffee. Is it good for you?
Good or bad?
Yeah. So the question is coffee good or bad? So it turns out that every study that's looked at coffee has either shown that it is not bad for you or it is downright good for you. So there's no downside in drinking coffee. Just go easy on the cream and the sugar in it. There you go. Man after my own heart. Yes. Green tea, also great.
I lost my brother and I kept told the same thing as he. So I said, wait a minute. I said, did something happen in your father's life? Is something going on? His mother's father wrote to divorce. So all the stress was, you know, that's, and I went through it after I lost my brother.
Yeah, yeah. So the question, I'm going to paraphrase what you told me. The question is, can emotional stress interfere with people's memories? And the answer that some of you are shouting out is totally correct. It absolutely can. It absolutely can. And I should point out that when I encourage people to go see their doctors, I'm not saying it's going to end up being Alzheimer's all the time, but that they should see their doctor so that they can understand what is the cause of the memory problems. And sometimes it is due to stress, and sometimes there's medications that can be helpful, and sometimes you just have to let whatever it is run its course. You use the example of a divorce. Well, you may just have to let it run its course before people are really going to be on the ball again. Yes?
I find that I can remember things way back, but current things I have a little problem about remembering.
Yeah. So she said that she can remember things well from way back. She's having a little trouble remembering current things. And I bet some of you in this room have figured out the answer, right? The things from way back, they're in the old memory file cabinet over here. The things today, they're in the new memory file cabinet over here in your hippocampus. So what you've just told me is, you know, my older memories in that part of the brain, that's working well, but my hippocampus, it's having a little trouble. So that's what that means. I want to pick new people. Yes?
I just wonder if you could address, I worked in a medical office.
I noticed people with dementia or Alzheimer's, some of them had a radical personality change. Is that something that's common?
Yeah. So the question is, how common is it to have a personality change when one develops some type of dementia? And so the answer is, most people develop some changes of their personality as the disease goes on. It could be just because they can't remember things, it makes them frustrated, it makes them irritable, that they can never remember anything, and that can happen. There also can be a more dramatic change, that people that were always very passive or happy-go-lucky can be more angry, and vice versa. Some people that were angry tend to be more passive or happy-go-lucky. And it depends on what part of the brain the disease is affecting. And there's actually some causes of dementia, such as this frontotemporal dementia, that affect personality first and foremost. But the most common cause of dementia, which is Alzheimer's, generally the personality change is either pretty small or it's pretty late in the disease. So in Alzheimer's, people usually say, he's still my crazy father, he just can't remember anything now. Whereas in frontotemporal dementia, people are like, this is not my father. My father would never do or say that. Okay, well, let's do one or two more questions, and then we'll do the book signing and find out more information about the research. Yes, sir?
Getting back to coffee.
Coffee, okay.
Decaf, is that as good or as bad as?
Yeah, so the question is decaf and regular coffee equally as good? So there are many things about decaffeinated coffee that are also good, which includes there's a lot of soluble fiber in it. It actually helps make the bowels work well and things like that. The caffeine is a little bit of a stimulant that can make people a little bit sharper. So obviously if you're drinking decaf, you don't get that stimulant effect. But there are other good things in decaf. Let's do one last question. Yes, sir. Yes, you.
How close are we to curing Alzheimer's?
That's a great question. How close are we to curing Alzheimer's? So, as I mentioned, we've never had a time in the history of this disease, which is over 100 years, that we have had so many new medications that are right now being tested in clinical trials. So I am very hopeful that within the next 5 to 10 years, we will have what I'm going to call a practical cure. And what I mean by that is that I don't know that it's realistic to sort of make people's memories back the way they were before they ever developed the disease. And I don't even know if it's realistic to totally stop the disease. But I think it is realistic to think we can slow it down so that instead of the disease, for example, taking between 4 and 12 years to between when it's first diagnosed and when people need everything done for them, maybe we could double or triple or quadruple that, right? So maybe make it 16 to 48 years until that time. Well, if it's 16 to 48 years and it's affecting people 70 years of age, then that's like a practical cure. So that's what we're hoping for. So that's a great question to end on. And again, I invite everyone to come up here, find out more about the research going on. And I can sign the book if you like.